The subconscious mind is a very important aspect of this change process that I'm going to be sharing with you because it is responsible for long-term memory. A critical element. If you get up in the morning and you've forgotten basic things that you learned when you were a child, like say walking, things like that, driving as an adult, you'd have to relearn everything every morning when you got up. So you don't have to do that, and you can thank your subconscious mind because it remembers all of those things. It's taken all of that conscious learning and turned it into habitual understanding. Think about driving for a minute. When you first learned how to drive a car, how many learned on a stick shift? I'm just curious. Are you old enough to have? Okay. Yeah, well, me too. And it was a nightmare. I don't know about you, but I'm sitting in this little car, and I've got a gear shift over here. It was on the column. That's how old I am. It was on a column shift, and I got 2 feet, but they're 3 pedals. I'm thinking bad engineering right away. It's a problem. What am I going to do with those? Then you got mirrors. You got people coming this way, people behind you. You got to steer the darn thing. You got to clutch, accelerator, brake. I mean, it was completely overwhelming, not counting my father, who was sitting next to me, yelling at me the whole time because he wanted to save his transmission in that car, and I'm popping the clutch, and it was an awful experience. But eventually, having survived it, I was able to move into an automatic version of driving, and now I don't think about it at all. In fact, most people don't think about driving at all. I noticed since I got here anyway. This is a very interesting place. But the beauty of it is you can have a conversation on the way from point A to point B. You don't remember driving at all. You had a great conversation, but somehow you get there. What's that about? I mean, who's paying attention? Fortunately, you have a very powerful part of you that is paying attention. That's your subconscious mind. That gets you around when you're doing the things that are really fun, and it takes care of most of these baseline things that would consume all our time if we had to do them consciously. All right, the conscious mind is time-bound, which means it's past and future-based. And for most conscious minds, if you're living with the scream mentality, you spend most of your time regretting your past and agonizing over the future. So that's not very much fun. Your subconscious mind is timeless, however. It thinks in the proverbial present moment only. So when you're talking to the subconscious mind, this fact is very important. It doesn't understand future tense requests. If you put your request, what you want, in a future tense for the subconscious, it mostly yawns and goes back to digesting your dinner because it doesn't get it. So you have to talk present tense. Now that seems a little crazy from your conscious mind's point of view because it's thinking, well, that hadn't happened yet. If I'm making up this statement that I want to be true, shouldn't I say I want it to be true? Only if you're trying to convince your conscious mind. So there's some rules about how you address and communicate with the subconscious that are very important to making it all work. Another difference, very important one, the conscious mind has limited processing capacity, maybe 1 to 3 events it can handle at a time. If you're at home and the phone rings and you're watching a TV program and somebody walks in from the kitchen and they want to talk to you, about that time when those 3 things are going on, you're saying, wait a minute, 1 thing at a time, I got to stop now. Because you really can't process. It only is processing at about a rate of 2,000 bits of information per second, which sounds wonderful and kind of awesome in its own way, unless you compare it to the subconscious mind, who has expanded processing capacity, can process thousands of events at a time, and averages 4 billion bits of processing capacity in a given second. That's an incredible difference. But if you think about it, this part of your mind would have to do that. Remember, it's in charge of motor functions. You can't walk, talk, digest your food, do respiration, digestion, or any of that without a huge amount of processing capacity. You couldn't sit up in your chairs. Because what you take for granted, you just say, well, I'm going to do that. You turn on your volition part, which is your conscious mind, and say, let's walk from here to there. But you can't walk from here to there consciously. If your subconscious mind doesn't agree, you aren't going anywhere. And that's true of your beliefs changing too. And we're getting to that. All right. It's easy to change habits of thought and behavior if you access the subconscious mind because it's the storehouse for attitudes, values, and beliefs. This is where doing your basic affirmations every day, which are generally so abstract that the subconscious mind can't understand it. It really doesn't care what you're trying to do because you haven't engaged it in any way, shape, or form. And you're talking to the wrong part of the mind in the first place. The subconscious mind is where all these attitudes, values, and beliefs are stored. So if you don't learn how to communicate with it properly, you aren't going to get very far. You're going to be very frustrated. And that's exactly what I was. That's why I'm sharing with you a whole different approach. All right, so as the the easiest and most effective way to communicate with the subconscious is through a process called muscle testing. And I'll bet you a bunch of you in this room have had some experience with muscle testing. Is that true? Can I see a show of hands? All right. So I'm going to ask you temporarily during this discussion, and also an experience that I'd like you to have, to forget everything you know about it right now. Pretend you don't have any preconceived notions about it. Humor me. There's some things that are very important about using muscle testing in a psychological way that are very different from using it in almost every other way. Vitamin mineral supplements, it's very popular. In applied kinesiology, clinical kinesiology, you're looking for organ distress, meridian dysfunctions, and so on. I'm not going to be talking about any of that, but I'm going to be talking about some key elements to using it as an accurate measure of what's going on in your subconscious mind, what those beliefs are and what they're not. Okay. We're going to have a little experience, and I'm going to ask someone to help me up here to demonstrate muscle testing a la PSYCH-K. PSYCH-K is the name of the name I give the work that I do. And I want to show you, when I'm using it as a psychological tool to access the subconscious and check for beliefs, how to set up an appropriate communication system. And the key here is appropriate. You want to get a true-false message system going. In other words, a conflict detector. You're measuring the truth between what your conscious mind says or is affirming and what your subconscious mind believes. Very important to be able to do that credibly. Like-dislike is essentially equivalent to a stress detector. I learned this one to use muscle testing in this way when I got out of graduate school. I was doing sort of mainstream counseling. That's the insight-based talk therapy version, where you come in and we sit down together and you tell me all your woes, and I nod and say, yeah, that's interesting, tell me more about that. And you do. And then you come back next week and you tell me more about that. And come back next week, you tell me more about that. Well, I got tired of hearing it, they got tired of talking about it, so I figured something's got to change here. And a part of me, which was really the business part, just said, wait a minute, there's got to be some kind of outcome here. I mean, business is all about outcomes, all about bottom line. Turns out therapy, as I was taught in graduate school, is all about process. You just stay in the process. It's good for you. Oh, where's the part where you get out and get a life? I mean, you know, when does it end? Well, apparently it wasn't supposed to end. I never got that. So I thought, well, that's not right. So we're going to do something about that. So in the like-dislike thing, what I found was interesting was I'd get people coming in, they'd fill out this intake form. And I'd always ask, have you had any other kind of counseling? And oh, yeah, and they're putting it down there, 15 years of psychotherapy and all that. That's no joke. And they would say, I'd say, okay. So, and they're writing down what their primary presenting problem is, what they're trying to deal with. And they just write down stuff about, I said, what about your childhood? Tell me about your relationship between your mother and a father, you know. So I remember this one client wrote down, yeah, well, I've dealt with my mother, you know, she was very abusive, psychologically and physically, and, but, you know, I've dealt with that, and I'm over it. And I said, oh, that's good. So we got to the muscle testing part, and I just had her stick her arm out, and I was going to do a little muscle test of stress detector style. And I said, think about your mother. So she did. And guess what happened? She just crashed and burned. I mean, she was a mess. The muscle response was very clear that just thinking about her mother still stressed her. All of those years of psychotherapy, all of those years of putting together reasons why I've now forgiven my mother, never got to the subconscious mind, which controls the motor functions, which controls the autonomic nervous system, which controls your biology, and ultimately your health. You know, Bruce mentioned, do you remember, about the biology and the effect on our immune systems? There are a whole set of beliefs that are immune-enhancing beliefs and a whole set of beliefs that are immune-suppressing beliefs. And if you look at the personality profiles of people who get various diseases, it becomes very interesting in a hurry. There's a whole field called psychoneuroimmunology, about 35 years of study in this country anyway, showing that people, for instance, cancer patients, one of the key qualities and attributes, personality characteristics of cancer patients is long repressed anger and hatred. They're really angry at somebody else, but if you hold that anger inside you, guess where it gets directed? It's your immune system. So the question is, how do you let go of stuff like that? We're going to be getting to that. So third down here is setting up a yes or no communication system, because in this work that I do, it's essential that you can communicate with the subconscious in a way to ask it questions and let it determine even what process is going to be used within this model of PSYCH-K that I use. There are a variety of belief change processes, just as there would be if I was a carpenter and I had my little bag of tools.